Most women were never taught that clothing belongs in their budget. They were taught it was the first thing to cut, or almost like to pretend like they never needed anything. If you grew up in a household where Dave Ramsey was the financial gospel, you know the script. By the end of this episode, you're going to understand how another personal finance expert, Ramit Sethi, thinks about clothing as a financial category and why knowing your style DNA will supercharge this approach. This is not just a money conversation. When a woman finally gives herself permission to plan for clothing, she clears the cognitive dissonance around the category. And once that's cleared, if she discovers her style DNA, she can leverage that knowledge for her own visibility. We're going to look at three ideas. One, the cultural script most women inherited about clothing and money. Two, what it actually does to your spending when your style DNA is clear. And three, what it looks like to start untangling both of those things at once. What I notice is that most women will plan carefully for all kinds of other things and then go completely blank when it comes to their own clothing, as if it were actually realistic for them to never change sizes or never wear their clothes out. So let's start with what Ramit Sethi actually says about clothing. Because he talks about living your rich life, most people assume Ramit is just permission to spend, but that's not quite right. His framework is called the conscious spending plan, and it has four buckets. One, fixed costs. He recommends that be 50 to 60% of your take-home pay. The second one is investments, and that would be recommended to be like 10%, and then savings at 5 to 10%, and guilt-free spending at 20 to 35%. So here is how clothing lands in that system. Basic clothing sits in fixed costs along with rent, grocery, utility, those car payments, student loan payments, all that kind of stuff. Expensive or extra clothing would sit in guilt-free spending. That's the 20 to 35% bucket you fund after fixed costs, investments, and savings are handled. And these are the things that you get to have choices about. The distinction he draws is this. If like elevated clothing or having more options genuinely enhances your life, fund it intentionally and unapologetically from that bucket. If it doesn't, then redirect your money into what actually matters to you. This is a meaningfully different conversation from the one that most of us grew up with. Um, and obviously, if you're in like uh, an extreme debt situation or really tight finances for a season, you can um, you can zero out your clothing for a year. You can zero it out maybe for 2 years. You can't zero out your clothing for the entire time from when you have a kid until when that kid graduates college. That's not realistic. In his every dollar budgeting, Dave Ramsey doesn't even include clothing as a named category. So the implicit message then in that is that needing clothing is a personal failure, not a legitimate human need. So many women absorbed that message. Yeah, unconsciously or subconsciously or whatever. And it didn't make them more financially responsible, actually. It made them more financially confused about this one specific category as well. Because zero's not a real number when it comes to clothing. You can't opt out of needing to be dressed. So the spending's going to happen anyway. It's just going to happen without a plan, without intention, and often with a lot of guilt. So when you give clothing a real number, something shifts. Then you stop reactive purchasing that happens when you feel behind. You stop buying things that are almost right because you needed something and you need it now. You start making choices. And that's where your style DNA enters the picture. So, style DNA is an acronym, and the D is for design. And that by that I mean your body's design. And we want to choose clothing that's in harmony with your body's design, color and line, and all the other artistic aspects. The N is for your needs. This is like your lifestyle. What do you actually need? You know, are you wearing suits to work or are you wearing scrubs to work? Um, and then A is for your aesthetic. And this should color all of your artistic choices, not just your clothing, but your home furnishings, I don't know, I was going to say stationery, but we don't really use that anymore. All the aesthetic things that you choose to surround yourself with. And I have kind of a unique way of getting at that, which I'll explain in a little bit. So last weekend, I went on a mom date with my daughters, and we ended up at Marshall's because I needed white summer tops. For me, with my coloring, white tops are a total summer staple, but they really only last one season. Parenthetically, I didn't throw away last year's white tops. A couple of weeks ago, I threw them in my washer with some RIT dye, and I turned them into a beautiful icy cyan, which is another really versatile summer color for me. Um, yeah, a couple of years ago, I did the same thing and I just do them all together. And I turned all my white summer tops that year into like a rosy coral. But back to the new purchases. When I got home, I opened up my wardrobe spending spreadsheet to log them, and I noticed how little I've spent this year. So we're halfway through the year, and I'm only $350 into a $600 budget. I actually have whole months this year when I haven't spent anything at all. And last year was really similar. Looking at my data, I realize I still regularly wear and really enjoy clothes that are like 3 or 4 years old. And my primary reason these days for getting rid of anything is simply that it's worn out, stained, or it doesn't fit me anymore. And that's the virtuous cycle. When you know what actually works for you, the shopping gets quieter. You stop filling gaps that really aren't there. And your basic clothing gets better. It's not necessarily more expensive because, like, I bought at that trip to the store, I got a pair of grass green linen trousers, which I love and will also be a staple for me. And they were like 12 bucks. But it's clothing that's better suited to you. So you stop buying things that are close and you stop buying things that are on sale, but they don't quite fit exactly what you need, or things that work in theory but feel slightly off every time you put them on. So when you start buying things that actually work for you, you find one thing, and then the one thing that you buy uh, that's exactly right ends up replacing multiple things that were close in your wardrobe. And that decreases decision fatigue when you go to get dressed. So you pull your stuff out to plan for your season at the beginning of the season or whatever. You might actually find that you don't need to buy anything that year except a couple white t-shirts. So Ramit's framework gives you permission to plan for clothing, and then style DNA, knowing yourself, gives you the accuracy to plan well. So when your basic clothing finally reflects who you are, you stop shopping to fix a feeling and start shopping to replenish what you love. When I found that pair of grass green linen trousers, my girls were both, don't you already have those? But actually, I don't. I had a pair of similar pants maybe 5 years ago or whatever, and I've gained like 25 pounds since then. So anyway, so the first step in my process is the congruence code. That's where you get a deep understanding of your mental wiring and how to use that to establish the building blocks of your style. Next is the heart of my work, signature style foundations. So this is what I was talking about finding your personal aesthetic. I ask you to collect images you find visually beautiful, not outfits. Uh, this would be images from the world of art, design, interiors, nature, um, any of those type of things. And uh, so you send me a collection of 10, and I analyze those images to find the artistic themes underneath what you're drawn to. And that is your essential aesthetic, or the aesthetic that captures your essence. So in that style guide, you also get your silhouette and best style lines that go with your silhouette. So that's the architecture of what actually works on your body. And then I help you connect it to what your eye already loves. Then the next step on this journey is I build you a custom color palette that is drawn from the visual favorites in your aesthetic images. And then I combine that with your inherent coloring in a way that is personal to you and harmonious. So it's your personality and your body coloring in one harmonious palette. So we can figure out together where you are or what you need in this sequence by a free style system synthesis call. So you can book that on my website, signaturestylesystems.com, or I will put that in the show description, the link to that. And yeah, it's just a 30-minute call, and we talk about where you're at and what you need, and I help you figure out what your next step is. Most women inherited a script that says clothing is frivolous, but Ramit Sethi's framework treats it as a line item, and your style DNA is what makes that work. That's the whole picture. A real budget category for a real human need and enough self-knowledge to spend that budget accurately. When those two things come together, getting dressed stops being a source of low-grade stress and starts being just something that works in your life, less friction. So here's something simple you can do this week. Pull up whatever you use to track your spending, even if it's just your bank app, and look at what you've actually spent on clothing in the last 6 months, just to see. The number you can see is a number that you can work with. And let's meet back here again real soon.